Ladies and gentlemen, please. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to see you all here today. We're getting closer and closer to the ultimate moment of COP when we will celebrate the incredible hosting that we've had here in Azerbaijan. And as we think of that, it's a great moment to also thank the IECA who've hosted this extraordinary pavilion. The team has been tireless. We appreciate Dr. Ibrahim, Lloyd Day, Margaret Ziegler, and the whole team who've been working on the pavilion here. So thank you so much for having us. And it's particularly exciting because you will be hosting us next in Brazil. And we know that there'll be a particular opportunity to explore the potential in the Americas. Today we're going to talk about some things that don't get talked about as much, which is the diversity of crops that are important to the agri-food system. That includes things that we're not hearing so much about. We've heard lots about corn, soy, rice, but we also want to hear about other crops that are important, and particularly because agriculture is a source of food, but it is also a source of other products. So agricultural products create wonderful, natural, biodegradable products that themselves have the potential to really assist the earth and the fight against climate change. And at the same time, we also have the opportunity to create economic opportunity through the bioeconomy. And a wonderful set of advocates for the bioeconomy have been IECA. So with that in mind, I'd like to call up Dr. Mohammed Ibrahim, who is going to bring us some opening remarks to set the stage. Dr. Ibrahim.
Good morning. First of all, let me welcome you to the Pavilion of the Americas and thank you for organizing this important event here. Growing climate solutions, bioeconomy, insights from hemp and cotton. I think bio-based industries, particularly those leveraging crops like hemp and cotton, offer innovative climate solutions. These crops serve as models of sustainable resource use, contributing to carbon neutrality and advancing low-emission economic systems. Integrating bioeconomy practices in agriculture can increase resilience to climate impacts. Hemp and cotton are two important crops through sustainable practices, reduce dependency on fossil fuels and enhance soil health, setting a standard for regenerative agriculture worldwide. The scaling of bio-based solutions demands cooperation across continents. By building partnerships with the Americas and other regions, stakeholders can share technologies, best practices, and policies that reinforce sustainable development. And it's important to look at the policy issue in terms of the legal regulatory frameworks where the countries are working on as it relates to hemp. Hemp and cotton demonstrate how renewable resources support circular economy models, reducing waste and creating eco-friendly materials that replace traditional carbon-intensive products. Effective policies are essential to drive the adoption of bioeconomy solutions. Coordinated policy support across sectors and regions can enable the scale-up of bio-based innovations and help reach climate and biodiversity targets. So I hope the discussions in the panel is going to give us more information, but also share information on the different continents as what has been the advances in the use of this in the hemp and cotton. And obviously, ICA as an institution has one of our main programs working on bioeconomy and looking at bioinputs, but also with a focus on bioenergy. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. So with that, we're going to get started with our panel. As was noted, we have a wonderful group of people who are active in a whole array of continents. First, I'd like to call up Mr. Jeff Whaling. Jeff is the chair of the National Hemp Association in the United States and has been an advocate for hemp for many years. He's also extraordinarily engaged in investment in the sector. So Jeff understands this space from multiple angles, and he lives on a farm in Pennsylvania. Next, I'd like to call John Young Simpson. John has been a long and dear friend. John has worked literally all over the world. I don't know of anyone who is more exemplifies being a global citizen than John. He is active here in Azerbaijan, where he is the chair of GP Cotton Holdings. GP Cotton includes Giltex, which is a textile manufacturer that made all those beautiful uniforms that we've been seeing on the volunteers around the space, all those turquoise t-shirts. And I mean, Azerbaijan has done such an amazing job having wonderful, smiling, greeting people who have made us all feel so welcome. I have never felt so welcome at a COP as they have done with this troop of people. So thank you for Giltex's support. They also include cotton manufacturers from around the world, but particularly here in Azerbaijan, they actually produce the cotton and they have the full ginning, spinning, and textile value chain. Next, I'd like to invite Gertrude Kambua. Gertrude is a land use expert from the Ministry of Agriculture in Malawi. Gertrude, it's a pleasure to have you here. Gertrude is a great technical expert on this space and can give us a lot of insights into land use, particularly in the context of the space that you have around Lake Malawi, which needs particular care and attention because Lake Malawi is one of the most beautiful places you'll ever be on the continent. And we have a fellow Malawian. Please come on up. Beatrice. Beatrice is with Africa Trust. Beatrice works actually helping to create projects that have a more distinct African voice across the continent. We also will be joined in a little bit by Veronica from Uruguay. She is on her way coming from the negotiations. Some of you may know that Gonzalo's was going to come and we have a small change in the plan, but Veronica will be an excellent representative of Uruguay who can speak to some of the work that they're doing on bioeconomy in Uruguay. So we look forward to her joining us. So with that, let's get started. Jeff, we're going to start with you first. You're working in hemp. It's a crop that sort of has fallen off the radar screen in many places for a long time. I'm from Canada. We've been growing it for about 30 or 40 years now, pretty regularly, but it's not as common elsewhere. But it has these huge climate impacts that are actually quite positive. Can you tell us a little bit about why hemp is an important crop?
Yeah, thanks, Robin, and thanks to Emerging Ag for including me in this important dialogue today. These events are really important for us to reintroduce industrial hemp to global economies, meeting with ministers of ag. What I would really like to express is that we look at industrial hemp as being one of the most sustainable commodities on the planet.
Sorry, could you?
This isn't my first rodeo, but thank you. We are reintroducing hemp. That was one of the staple commodities around the world, and it has been prohibited mostly because of American interference for the last 95 years. But hemp is legal again in the United States, thanks in part to the work of the National Hemp Association. Industrial hemp was legalized as a commodity in the 2018 Farm Bill, and now we are starting to reintroduce the crop not only in the United States but around the world. 62 countries have followed the example in the United States in passing regulations and legislation to allow this crop to be possible again, to be part of their agricultural economies. Malawi is a very good example. The president declared hemp to be a commodity of importance 2 years ago, and they have built an entire whole of government approach to reintroduce this commodity. We're seeing many nations do the very same thing, but it is the most sustainable crop on the planet, and I can certainly talk about its benefits throughout this panel discussion. So thank you.
Thanks. Well, actually, let's talk a little bit, just before you pass off to John, let's talk a little bit more about what hemp's impact is on climate.
Yes, so industrial hemp is the most sustainable crop on the planet. It consumes or sequesters more CO2 than any other crop, and that includes trees. The crop can grow to its full potential, which could be, depending upon the varieties and the regions of the world, to 24 to 26 feet high in 90 days. And it sequesters that carbon deep into the soil because of its taproot and finger root system. But it also is, surprisingly enough, a commodity that needs very little water, needs very little amendments to the soil. And by planting it using regenerative agricultural practices, it certainly will help us keep carbon sequestered and not disturbing the microbes that are in the ground that are so vitally important to the soil.
Fantastic. So, John, we're here in Azerbaijan. They call it the white gold of Azerbaijan, cotton. It's a sector that's had a huge history in the country. What do you see as the opportunity on climate change and adaptation from the perspective of the cotton sector here?
Thank you, Robin, and again, thanks to yourself and Emerging Ag for inviting us and our team along here today to speak on this panel. So yeah, as you said, cotton is an extremely important crop for Azerbaijan, been grown for more than 70 years and is the primary crop grown in the regions. Azerbaijan's climatic regions vary considerably. They're an incredible producer of all different crops and foods, but from a scale perspective, it is cotton. In our own business, we contract with 8,000 farmers every year to grow cotton on our behalf, and then we gin that and produce yarn and then textiles, all within a 250 kilometer long supply chain. So it's this very tight, short supply chain. Cotton in many ways is also a crop that's used by the government to distribute oil and gas wealth from a concentrated state-owned oil company into the regions. So it's incredibly important for rural livelihoods and in the regions there. Our teams and our leadership teams are working very hard to move cotton in Azerbaijan from really a kind of low-value crop, a low-value exporter, to a much higher value exporter based on quality, based on traceability and sustainability. And so there's been a huge investment from the stakeholders that we work with, our shareholders, and vision from the Ministry of Agriculture, realizing that we shouldn't be exporting our fibers at a discount. We should be achieving a premium for them because of this unique story. And so that's why cotton is still so important for Azerbaijan, but also is really a focus for diversifying against this concentration of oil and gas wealth. Yeah.
Fascinating. And then as you're thinking about what you can do on the climate question here, you've touched on just a couple of things very briefly, but what kind of programming are you doing to make sure that cotton is more sustainable here?
So with the country hosting COP, it provided us with a really fantastic opportunity to accelerate how we look at carbon and our carbon imprint from our industry. I think if it weren't for COP, a lot of the initiatives that we followed wouldn't have come so quickly. In the last 12 months, we've been able to accelerate carbon baselining in our upstream business for our fiber production, as well as in our textile businesses. The results of that carbon baselining was slightly as we expected, is that on average, Azerbaijan's carbon emissions per ton of fiber produced is lower than the global average, just due to that short supply chain. What it's also done, COP coming to Azerbaijan, has also brought this whole discussion of sustainability from top to bottom through the country, from the top of the leadership and from the ministries, but with our 3,000 employees, understanding it's a small country hidden in the Caucasus they're not exposed to these ideas around sustainability, etc. And we've really been able to bring these discussions around sustainability, how important it is that we manage the externalities in our business. And so as leaders in the industry who are trying to promote change all the time, by COP coming here, that's really helped us. And so we have a very large land leveling program in the country where the soils basically haven't been leveled in the 70 years of production in the Soviet system. And by introducing things like land leveling, we're able to use much less water in our production system.
Water conservation is such an important issue. Gertrude, you have the opportunity to think about land in such a unique way, right? Not everybody is thinking about the importance of soil, about how a landscape works. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approach that in the department and what kind of role you see for products like cotton and hemp, both of which are actually produced and, in the case of hemp, recently legalized in your country?
Thank you very much, moderator. Maybe let me start by thanking the organizers for inviting us to be part of this panel, and probably now to provide the context in terms of land management in our country. I hope you're aware that we are an agro-based economy, and agriculture is a key element in our development. It's actually driving the economic development of our country. But we have a problem of land degradation. And the ministry, through our department, is actually looking at how we can address that problem so that when we address land degradation, it means we have improved the soil, and then we have the volumes for marketing, but also feeding the population and all that is required. Now, in terms of land management, our approach is to introduce technologies that will help to reclaim the land in terms of maintaining its soil fertility. And currently we're looking at soil health. And we have interventions about containing the soil where it is, because we have a problem of soil erosion. So we're also looking at how we can keep the soil where it is so that we use it for growth. Now, to link it to what we are discussing here in terms of hemp, we note its environmental benefits, especially those on soil health, but also carbon sequestration, because you agree with me that currently we're experiencing the impacts of climate change, and the agriculture sector is actually in our country greatly impacted upon. And therefore, we are looking at interventions that will help us to build the resilience of our farmers and the farming systems. So introducing hemp for us in Malawi has that benefit to address the environmental benefits, but also the economic. In fact, I think the driver for introducing or adopting hemp as a crop of importance in Malawi currently is because of its benefits, especially for the economic side, where we are looking at foreign exchange earnings, but also job creation, and also improving the livelihoods of our farmers. So bringing the diversity in the crops that we use for export. Currently, we are only relying on tobacco, sugarcane, coffee, and tea. And there's been a reliance on tobacco. So we are thinking hemp is an alternative that will help us to grow the economy, but also help the livelihoods of our farmers. So that is the space we're looking at in terms of promoting hemp from a land management perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Thank you.
Excellent. And I mentioned Lake Malawi. Have you been doing any studies on how to make use of hemp or other crops to protect the watershed as well as the soil? I know you've got a lot of soil moving into Lake Malawi. That's an issue. And your rivers, you also have to manage this. What kind of role are you seeing for plants for riparian zones?
Well, thank you very much. So currently, what we are doing as a country is to look at the land management work that we are doing from a catchment perspective. So our colleagues in the water resources have divided our country into water resource areas, basically big catchments. But when we are working with farmers, we are looking at small catchments, micro catchments. So in that dimension or context is where we can then use hemp to grow it as a crop that will help us to avoid deforestation, for example. But also because of its benefit, the environmental that have been talked about already. I know Jeff talked about them, the doctor introducing the panel also talked about it. Yeah, so what we're looking at is looking at the whole of the Lake Malawi being influenced by the watersheds around it. When we start with the smallholder farmers, that can be scaled up to the watershed level. So our approach is to start small and grow, scale up outwards. So we're seeing that this can help us in terms of that, addressing the issues of soil erosion that I talked about and protecting the lake itself. So doing that, we'll need resources in terms of, for example, increasing the awareness of its importance, hemp, as it pertains to watershed management so that we protect our lake, but also just to provide the expertise, the technical expertise. So already we have an enabling environment in terms of the act. The regulatory framework is available. We have an act that is allowing us to do hemp because we didn't have, actually it was like something negative. Now we're looking at it positively because of its benefits. Now, we know that hemp also has its industrial benefits. Those are the ones that we also want to increase the awareness about so that when we understand together as a country, we'll promote it and just increase it, raise that profile of hemp so that we grow it to the scale probably more than what we did with tobacco because of these benefits. But we need to start from somewhere, and that's what we're doing. So we need the support in terms of research, for example, having a good market, but also the policies, that's what we're already working on. And the other things that I talked about earlier on. But we see hemp as a good crop that can help us. Thank you.
Excellent. Beatrice, just give me one moment before we pop back to you in a moment. But a quick question. Gertrude, what about cotton? Because you also have a large area in the south of the country that used to produce quite a bit of cotton, and I think that that's being examined about how to revitalize the sector and some of those gins, etc.
Oh, sorry, right. I remember you asked about cotton as well, so sorry that I didn't include it. Yeah, that's correct. Yes, in Malawi, we also have cotton as one of the cash crops, but it has been beleaguered with a number of problems, but now the government is working into how to improve its production and productivity, increase the productivity. So the issues were around the seed, availability of the seed, but also the inputs and the marketing. So those are the issues that we are kind of addressing at the moment so that we can grow the cotton industry. But looking at the areas where we are growing cotton, the potential is still there, is still high, and we believe that with the new information in terms of innovations and probably research, we can do something about our cotton industry and grow it better. What we have noted is that production has been reducing over time, and while we have the potential to gin a lot, for example, 250,000 metric tons for ginning, but we only produce about 30,000 metric tons, which is not deterring. So it's an area that as government we are looking into so that we can grow the cotton market value chain.
Fascinating that you had those markets, lost them, and now it's the moment to bring back some of that mix. Very quickly, Jeff, there was a reference to the various industrial uses of hemp. I don't think we've had a chance to touch on those before we go to Beatrice.
So where to begin? So under our research, we at the National Hemp Association have identified that industrial hemp has a global total addressable market of $15 trillion. And those sectors include carbon sequestration, the textile industry, sustainable energy, oils, gasolines, ethanols, bioplastics, and certainly, as we're talking here today, about textiles. The opportunity is huge. For those of you that are as old or near as old as I am, you might know a German company, BASF. We see industrial hemp kind of following their model. They don't make anything, we just make things better, and that's what we can explore with industrial hemp.
And there's, there's so much opportunity for fiber, but also feed and innovative products. Let me just pop to Beatrice for one moment and get into element of smallholders that Gertrude referenced, and the desire to make sure that production involves smallholders. John was talking about working with 8,000 smallholders, so I'll come back to John in just one moment, and then we'll get Veronica into the conversation. But if I recall correctly, we have a mutual friend in Daiborn, Jabonga, and that you used to work at NASFAM. Is that correct, Beatrice? Which is the National Smallholders Association in Malawi. So she has a very direct experience of engaging with smallholders, and I know that's very aligned to the work you're doing at Trust Africa. How do you think you take products, crops that are diverse, and deploy them across smallholders, where there's a lot of pressure to kind of often grow the same thing over and over again in a sense of security, but the opportunity will never also explore if they don't have a range of crops at their disposal?
Thank you very much. I think the conversation so far has been really around projecting hemp as well as cotton industry, but with a smallholder lens in terms of inclusivity. I think as we have a conversation on revitalizing for some, like in the case of cotton, but also introducing emerging markets around hemp, it's to look at these entering into global value chains, of which therefore our support in terms of strengthening, mobilizing and organizing smallholder production base, not just for primary production in terms of selling, say for example in the case of cotton, just the cotton lint itself for sale, but really organizing the production base around the possible and opportunities of agro-based industries that I'm talking about. So for example, if we talk about hemp, it is beyond just the fiber. But what else can smaller and domestic economies can grow within that? Because then that you make a solid value proposition for smallholders. So we see that whilst these opportunities emerge, there's a whole lot around strengthening organization and institutional support at smallholder level, but also then the technical capacity for them to produce in an organically sustainable manner, at the same time access to affordable and equitable access to both inputs as well as the output markets. So in that ecosystem, then we are looking at how then can the hemp industry as well as the cotton industry deliver fair value, but also even the creation of decent jobs for the farmers themselves and have fair pricing. And it's about beyond the dollar. We are looking at there's a potential, I think experts are projecting that maybe by 2028, the hemp industry itself is supposed to grow by $48 billion in 2028. But then how much does then go to the smallholder farmer for them to invest? So details around voice and participation, but also that we build around not just legislation to produce, but also legislation for meaningful participation in the emerging markets.
Brilliant points. I think amongst the things that that hemp can do is it could produce a microgreen in just a week or two that could be used to feed people with a very simple meal of vegetables, but also quite high protein. There's the seed itself, which could be crushed for oil or used as a hemp seed, a hemp heart product for eating. So hemp has a variety of uses that are available. I think you're alluding to that. What do you find is the right mix when you're looking at what is potentially a cash crop, an export crop, but also looking for household nutrition? How do you try and find that balance in your experience?
I think the experience is that for livelihood at household level, they're both looking at both addressing and meeting the food needs as well as income needs. So for a crop that can tick on both sides, but also maybe the potential for them to grow into it, I think these ones then provide that kind of a potential. So it's about utilization, not necessarily coming to with a message of producing to market, but also producing for own consumption as a family, and then packaging that for the farmers to say that beyond the market, how then can also you utilize the same at household level. So it's really bundled up services that need to go to the farmers, so that when we are strengthening their participation, it is certainly holistic and systems thinking that also begins with their engagement process in that particular value chain.
Fantastic. And what is your best advice for the whole panel, honestly, about making sure that smallholders do have that agency, that full voice that you were talking about?
I think for one, it's for mobilizing and organizing, but also participating in the policy formulation processes so that they have the lens and being responsive to these particular needs. So policy should respond not just to production, but also policy should respond in how then they are giving them marketing options. At the end of the day, I think it's about options, that the farmers should have options, and those options should really also touching on how then do we finance their participation in these emerging markets, and supporting that inclusive model, as well as giving financial products that allows them to grow. So as we continue to emerge, and maybe even for Malawi in this case, we have a 250,000 metric ton ginning potential. We are currently at 30,000. How do we revitalize that sector, but with a critical support mechanism that goes to the production of the smallholder farmers?
Excellent. John, we'll give you a chance to intervene on this. I know you had a thought earlier as well, and the ginning point is well made.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to ask the panel a question, maybe Gertrude or I mean, anyone can answer. I mean, so in Zimbabwe and in Zambia, you had, exactly as you said, 500,000 tons each year of cotton being ginned. That industry basically collapsed due to cheap imports of polyester, etc. Those gins and textile industries were underpinned through government contracts for school uniforms, police uniforms, civil sector uniforms, etc. And then Asia basically destroyed that industry through cheap polyester imports. It's very sad actually seeing in Zimbabwe and Zambia school children going to school with very poor quality polyester clothes, but that's a different issue. But when it comes to the farmers, I always say there's two types of farmers. There's farmers who farm with a price at the end of the year, and there are farmers who are gamblers every year, and they're farming and planting and they don't know what price they're getting. Does hemp solve that issue? Are there the off-takers or the industry partners who can come into Malawi to guarantee prices to allow us to scale up hemp planting in a way where we're de-risking the farmer? Because I think we always talk about financing for farmers. There always somehow is financing available based on the fact that there's a price at the end of the day. But that's what hemp needs to do. Hemp needs to be able to create that price for the farmer that can be underwritten by the financier. But I don't know who wants to try and answer that question.
I think drawing from that, we've been working in Zambia as well as in Mozambique and in Malawi to really creating price mechanisms that's beyond just production policies, but also to create regulatory mechanism and now a pricing structure that is involving farmers, so that at least then you can have a guaranteed price, but also in case of global shocks in terms of pricing, what incentives can cushion the farmers to continue reinvesting so that they don't do the shifts, 1 year shifts into another crop and into another. So that what you can then guarantee. But also, I think the move that Malawi has taken to really look into domestic industrialization, even putting in supportive policies around Buy Malawi strategy, that really strengthens the utilization internal, so that you don't just look into export markets. And also looking at, now we are looking at strengthening regional trade and regional industrialization under the African Free Continental Trade Agreements. So it's really to look at leveraging those opportunities, at the same time having a good balance between building domestic industries that then can offset and offtake, but also looking into the export potential. So it borders around the regulation as well as mechanism that will make pricing right, but also the price setting mechanisms that are responsive to what the farmers need.
If I may just expand on that from an industrial hemp perspective, we are reintroducing a commodity that, as I said, has been prohibited around the world for some 85, 90 years. We know that farmers would like this opportunity, and we know that end users want to adopt sustainable practices and industrial hemp into their production. this is not a chicken and egg issue for me. It's a scrambled egg issue. We need to deal with all of those things along that supply chain. Robin alluded to it. One of the things that I have done is also try to address bringing capital to this market. And never did I think that I would be working with governments around the world and establishing a fund in partnership with governments. We've created a Replant Rural America Fund in partnership with USDA, where they are providing the leverage for any private sector investments that we will bring to the table to de-risk farmers taking on and manufacturers taking on a new commodity like industrial hemp. That model is being duplicated right now in Africa and in Central and South America. So it's the things that we're trying to do, but we all know that farmers are not going to take on a new commodity unless they know where that market is. And I think that if we, as we work with the cotton industry and others, the automotive sectors, to find those opportunities for end users, and that will allow us to go to the farmers and say, we need X. But on another thing that we've been doing is advancing research. We at the National Hemp Association have just been awarded a almost $20 million USDA conservation grant. About 19 million of that dollars will go directly to farmers to plant hemp as a barrier crop along the tributaries leading into the Chesapeake Bay watershed. That's a 5-year initiative. 5,000 acres will be produced in each of the next 5 years, but that will allow us to also introduce hemp and its potential to farmers, and actually having a government-backed award sponsor that, so farmers will not have to worry about their offtake agreements, where they're getting that seed. So that's what we're doing in the United States, but those things can be replicated around the world.
Well, let's talk about another area of the world. Veronica Duran has joined us from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries and Livestock in Uruguay. We want to thank her so much for stepping in, and we really welcome you to this panel. We've been having a great exchange with the examples of cotton and hemp, but talking a little bit about bioeconomy. And Uruguay has an entire bioeconomy plan. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Muchas gracias. ¿Me escuchan? ¿Sí? Bien. Disculpen mi llegada tarde. Estaba en una reunión con el ministro Matos y no pude llegar antes. Y disculpen que mi inglés no es tan fluido, así que voy a hablar en español. Bueno, en Uruguay no tenemos una gran producción de algodón, claramente no. De cáñamo sí, incipientemente, aunque estamos más focalizados en el uso medicinal del cáñamo. Pero lo que les quería compartir no está tan centrado en el cáñamo ni en el algodón, sino en la estrategia de bioeconomía sostenible que estamos llevando adelante, que es parte de la estrategia que ustedes también estaban comentando. Primero, decirle algunas palabras sobre Uruguay, porque es posible que no lo tengan en el mapa bien ubicado. Uruguay es un gran oferente de algunos commodities y está muy bien rankeado como oferente de celulosa, de leche en polvo, de lana, de arroz, obviamente de carne, sobre todo congelada, de soja. Y está caracterizado por tener una sostenibilidad genuina en sus 3 dimensiones, digamos, ambiental, económica y social. Esto quiere decir que todos estos logros en términos productivos y económicos y de inserción internacional los hemos logrado a través de los años sin subsidios ni distorsiones de mercado. O sea, realmente hay una competitividad genuina por parte de la producción agropecuaria en Uruguay. El resultado, mejor dicho, estos resultados se han obtenido gracias a un conjunto de políticas de Estado que tienen varias décadas de diseño y de aplicación en el país, básicamente regulaciones, también bienes públicos sectoriales y algunas intervenciones focalizadas hacia productores familiares o pequeños agricultores. Entonces, esto nos da unas fortalezas y capacidades para justamente expresar esto en términos de nuestra capacidad productiva y de inserción en los mercados. Pero todavía el país tiene mucho más para ofrecer y tiene un mayor potencial que puede desarrollar a través de continuas mejoras en nuestras políticas públicas. Solo para rápidamente contarles de cómo el Uruguay enfoca las políticas hacia el sector agropecuario y en particular yendo hacia la estrategia de bioeconomía. Hace más de 40 años que tenemos leyes de protección del bosque nativo y de los recursos hídricos por ley. O sea que hay regulaciones muy precisas que tienen una gran trayectoria. Tenemos una política nacional de aguas desde 2009. Tenemos 100% del bosque nativo protegido por ley, con un monitoreo estricto y una fiscalización. Hace 20 años empezó el país a instalar la exigencia a los agricultores de presentar planes de uso y manejo de los suelos, por lo cual limitamos el monocultivo, le exigimos a los productores que hagan rotaciones anuales de los distintos cultivos justamente para evitar el principal riesgo ambiental que tenemos en los suelos, que es la erosión hídrica, porque por el régimen de lluvias que tenemos en el país, si los suelos quedan descubiertos en invierno, por ejemplo, tenemos un gran riesgo de pérdida de suelos y ahí le exigimos a los productores que hagan unos planes de uso y manejo adecuado de suelos y de aguas, y también tenemos más recientemente planes para la lechería sostenible que implican gestión obviamente de los efluentes. Todo esto son básicamente regulaciones, leyes y bueno, sobre estas regulaciones hemos construido bienes públicos sectoriales. Por ejemplo, la trazabilidad, tenemos trazabilidad obligatoria de todo el ganado bovino y después otros sistemas de trazabilidad complementarios, por ejemplo, de la miel, del citrus, del ganado porcino. Y también, como parte de las regulaciones que tiene el país, tenemos las buenas prácticas agrícolas también reguladas y con un fuerte apoyo desde el Estado para el conocimiento, la capacitación y las recomendaciones a los agricultores de cuáles son las buenas prácticas, y también una ley de bienestar animal desde 2009. O sea que todo esto resulta en elevadísimos niveles de estatus sanitario que nos permiten llegar a los mercados más exigentes en la mayoría de los productos que exportamos. Eso gracias también a que tenemos leyes de inocuidad muy estrictas. Por ejemplo, la prohibición de hormonas de crecimiento en la producción animal, bueno, y un conjunto de regulaciones de inocuidad también con altos estándares. Y en la parte que tiene que ver con la investigación, el país tiene largas y fuertes inversiones en lo que tiene que ver con genética, tanto animal como vegetal. Entonces, todo este conjunto de bienes públicos y regulaciones no son algo nuevo para el Uruguay, pero son sí la base para potenciar una estrategia de bioeconomía que lo que busca es diversificar nuestra matriz productiva. Les quiero comentar que uno de nuestros mayores desafíos como país es aumentar la tasa de crecimiento económico, o sea, ser más dinámicos en términos de crecimiento económico, y también diversificar la canasta productiva y exportadora agropecuaria, tanto en términos de productos como de destinos, porque ahí el país está muy concentrado en los principales productos, que son estos que les comentaba, ¿no? Carne, soja, celulosa, y necesitamos diversificar la canasta. Entonces, ahí es donde la estrategia de bioeconomía entra a tener un rol importante, porque justamente nos permite ampliar la oferta a otros productos y aprovechar los recursos naturales que tenemos de una manera mucho más eficiente y lograr potenciar nuestro crecimiento biobasado. Todo este desarrollo que hemos logrado y lo que nos ha traído hasta acá es que tenemos una gran institucionalidad, público y privada, Ahí, por ejemplo, yo les pongo en el medio los principales ministerios que tienen que ver con la producción agropecuaria. Por supuesto, el Ministerio de Ganadería, Agricultura y Pesca, pero también el Ministerio de Ambiente, el Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas, el Ministerio de Industria y Energía. Son los principales actores públicos con los que trabajamos para desarrollar todas estas políticas y bienes públicos. Pero después tenemos un conjunto de institutos público-privados que son donde los productores, las organizaciones de productores pueden expresar sus demandas y su visión del desarrollo de cada sector. Y tenemos algunos institutos entonces especializados en carne, en leche, en vino, en semillas, y así un conjunto de institucionalidad que tiene financiamiento público-privado. Y después, bueno, obviamente forma parte de esta institucionalidad toda la academia, también las universidades y distintos institutos de investigación y de promoción de las exportaciones. Esta institucionalidad también es algo que el país ha venido construyendo a lo largo de muchas décadas y que está en permanente, digamos, mejora y rediseño. Entonces, con todo este background que el país tiene, ahora el Uruguay se ha propuesto trabajar activamente hacia una estrategia de bioeconomía sostenible, con la visión justamente de consolidar y diversificar nuestra matriz productiva, lo que les decía, ¿no? Tratar de tener una canasta más amplia de productos y que eso también nos permita llegar a mercados distintos, a productos más sofisticados, con mayor innovación tecnológica. Y basado obviamente en el uso biológico, el uso de nuestros recursos biológicos en manera sostenible, eficiente e innovadora. En particular, la estrategia de bioeconomía que yo les estoy comentando, la elaboramos conjuntamente con 11 ministerios, o sea que abarca mucho más de lo que normalmente, las instituciones que normalmente trabajan con el Ministerio de Ganadería, Agricultura y Pesca, porque esta estrategia, por supuesto, incluye aspectos que tienen que ver con la salud, aspectos que tienen que ver con la cultura y con la innovación, por supuesto la industria, pero también el turismo y otro conjunto de ministerios que han participado para elaborar esta estrategia de largo plazo. Hemos construido así una estrategia que está basada en estas 4 dimensiones. Promover la producción y el consumo circular y sostenibles, tener una inserción internacional basada en el valor agregado ambiental. Eso es algo que Uruguay apuesta mucho porque tenemos en realidad muy buenos indicadores de sostenibilidad ambiental y en realidad eso por ahora no hemos logrado que los mercados reconozcan ese valor agregado ambiental. No hemos logrado llegar a que el consumidor diferencie productos que son elaborados en forma sostenible. Y bueno, ahora estamos queriendo justamente que nuestra inserción internacional esté más basada en este valor agregado ambiental. Después, la ciencia, tecnología e innovación en la economía, eso es fundamental porque tenemos, por ejemplo, en cáñamo, estamos investigando sobre los usos medicinales, porque en Uruguay se puede producir con fines medicinales. Entonces, bueno, estamos tratando de generar innovación y tecnología vinculado a un conjunto de cadenas que permitirían un uso más eficiente de los recursos que tenemos. Y esto siempre en un contexto de inclusión territorial. El Uruguay es un país bastante escaso de población. Es un país que nosotros decimos es pequeño, pero en realidad lo que es pequeño es su población, no tanto su territorio. Es más bien despoblado más que pequeño. Y el sector agropecuario es uno de los pocos sectores que está distribuido geográficamente por todo el territorio. Entonces es importante para nosotros justamente que estas cadenas de valor basadas en nuestros recursos biológicos puedan fortalecerse para lograr llevar el desarrollo a todas partes del territorio. Por último, para ir cerrando, comentarles que en el marco de este marco, o sea, con este marco estratégico hemos desarrollado un plan de acción de 3 años, 2024 a 2026, que tiene 12 acciones que fueron elaboradas en conjunto por el sector público y el sector privado y que están de alguna manera distribuidas en estas tres dimensiones que tienen que ver con el desarrollo productivo y territorial, Ahí, por ejemplo, estamos apuntando fuertemente a generar y a promover el uso de bioinsumos para ir sustituyendo o para ir complementando los insumos fertilizantes, pesticidas, etcétera, de origen químico, e irlos haciendo hacer un uso lo más racional posible de ese tipo de químicos y generar bioinsumos que le permitan al país tener otro tipo de insumos complementarios. Después en investigación y desarrollo, como les comentaba, queremos fomentar mucho los parques industriales, porque ahí es donde podemos obtener también vínculos entre las distintas industrias para aprovechamiento de los residuos, por ejemplo. Y en los procesos industriales, por supuesto, las biorefinerías y la biomasa como energía, como fuente de energía, son lo que se destacan. Eso es lo que les quería comentar sobre lo que estamos haciendo en Uruguay. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. It was great to see the disciplined approach to the strategy that you have in Uruguay that's really looking at what true circularity represents. So to see the intersection with forests, with products like honey, with products like livestock, the way in which you look at the entire ecosystem, I think aligns well to what we were discussing as you arrived. We have a little bit of time for one or two questions. Are there some questions in the audience?
Hi, so hello, yeah. So curious as this, global hemp economy develops, or global bioeconomy develops, I should say, and hemp as this leading commodity crop, do you see, and curious answers across the board, should certain countries be looking to specialize in, say, one or two products, specifically looking at textiles, perhaps in Malawi, or biofuels, somewhere in the United States, or should we be taking more of a general approach to push every sector in every country across the board? Yeah.
Jeff, I think that's to you.
Let's give it to John. So I get asked questions like this all the time. What is the future for industrial hemp? I see that we really have a 20-year process to unfold in front of us. Over the next 5 years, as countries around the world start to legalize industrial hemp, put regulations into place, we will continue to research hemp, the varieties, because we don't really know what will grow where and perfectly, and what its potential end use is. We are seeing hemp incubators created around the world to try and advance that technology and know-how, bringing forward best practices, regenerative agricultural practices, which certainly can address many of the issues that are confronting the world. 10 years from now, we will be well on our way to a multi-billion-dollar industry, in most part partnering with other industries like the cotton industry. And 20 years from now, when I think I'll be long gone from this earth, people will be saying, what was the big deal? Because by that point, hemp should be everywhere.
We haven't touched on this question of the very inventive things we can be doing with natural things. So for decades now, we've been inventing a lot of things based on fossil fuels, right? Plasticizing, using polyesters, etc. Some of this work has been really broadening about ways in which we can use natural products again. Maybe both of you could talk a little bit about what's the potential for hemp in totally other sectors, construction, vehicles, etc. Some of the potential to return biodegradable, renewable products into the textile business that's been taken over by synthetics.
Well, let me start by saying that I am no longer surprised when I get phone calls from people from around the world. Recently, I got a phone call from the University of Glasgow, and they told me that their research had proven out that hemp protein can now be used for replacement for human plasma, something that most people have never given any consideration to. I also am approached by SpaceX saying that they're using hemp as a productive component to re-entry heat shields. So it has that potential, but certainly, as we look, there are fine examples that are already in place. As BMW was advancing industrial hemp for bioplastics in their i3 and i8 series, which was the foray into all-electric vehicles, they took that to the next step, and now those vehicles are no longer being made because industrial hemp components are available through their entire series of lines that they're offering. They're also looking at using hemp as a byproduct from using hemp to produce energy. They're producing something called crystalline. Crystalline is one of the most sought after raw materials for the chips and semiconductors industry. So we are just discovering, and I guess one of my favorite stories to tell is when people say, well, we hear that hemp is conductive and you can use it in electricity. And I said, well, we've been doing it in the United States for a long time. There was this gentleman whose name was Benjamin Franklin. And if you look at this gentleman who put that kite up in the sky, and his notebook says that he knew that his theory of electricity traveling on a circuit was realized because the hemp rope that was holding that kite up in the sky, those natural fibers were starting to stand on end. So he knew that it had connectivity. So what we're doing is seeing something that was very old, being renewed again, and the advancements of research will just make sure that the sky is the limit.
Yeah, I think if we look back to Southern Africa, we don't have an advantage in power. We're a massively power short region. So any processing of fibers and crops needs to be done without relying on power, because the cost of electricity is 3, 4, 5 times that in other markets, and so you would have to have your fibers exported to be processed and then re-imported, which just goes against the point of trying to promote industrial development through these kinds of fibers. But when it comes to cotton, and as a leader in the cotton and fiber industry, what we're really trying to do is find partners who are trying to break away from fast fashion, from the wasteful side of industry, and understand the longevity of natural products when they're blended well, when they're blended with much stronger products like hemp, etc., like Jeff's jacket here. So it's really about finding coalitions of industrial partners who see the way forward, and that's really the way that we can try and change consumer behavior. I talk to a lot of people who work in strategy in fashion and textiles, and they believe consumers are kind of at a point where they're 5 minutes away from realizing a lot of the polyester and products that they're wearing from brands like Lululemon, etc., are just not good for their skin, and there'll be a whole shift backwards. It's obviously not going to go away. I believe that the fiber industry is like the protein industry, like the energy industry. We need all kinds of solutions for a growing population.
So probably to contribute to the dialogue and the conversation around hemp becoming an important crop in our economy, for us, as you have heard already, that was done like 2 years ago, the president himself pronouncing it as a crop of importance. Now, it's an area that is just coming up, it's growing, and although we see that there are some challenges at the moment, but we still believe we can take it up and look at the greater part of the greater good of the hemp, the economic as well as the environmental benefits. while we are sorting out the issues like energy, for example. Maybe we could be producing it for the feedstock, for those that have the machinery and everything else. But of course, in our own case, we're also looking at making sure that we don't just export all the raw materials. So I guess by the time we have sorted out the power issues, we should be able to do our own ginning, maybe, and also producing other materials from hemp. But I think for us, also what is important is the catchment management, to protect our environment. And like Jeff pointed out, that they're looking at riparian protection. It's also an option for us. I mean, we can learn from what they're doing. So the beauty with us is that we are learning from the experts, and we are taking advantage of the lessons that they've learned. We are putting that in practice. So we have the advantage of doing better, not even experimenting, but just getting the best practices and putting them into practice. So we believe that this is a good option for us and going forward. And maybe for the cotton, not so much, because it's an area that we're still struggling. We are just trying to rebuild the cotton industry itself, but we're doing something. At least the 30,000 metric tons is something, but we need to do more, and we have that potential to do more. So yeah, maybe to answer his question, that's what we can say about Malawi. Thank you.
Fantastic. And you also learned best practices from Uruguay on creating a bioeconomy policy that is holistic and inclusive. I saw Jeff signaling that he'd like to add one more thing.
You touched on something that we have now grabbed, embraced, and launched just last week in Philadelphia at the Green Bill Sustainability Conference. We launched a new initiative called The Goodness of Hemp. And we are taking that campaign on the road to demonstrate how hemp can be sustainable, reliable, and good for our environment. And in this particular case, we launched it with 12 of our members who are focused on hemp being used in the construction industry. And we'll do it for food, we'll do it for textiles, we'll do it in every sector that we can. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Going to ask the panel, because believe it or not, we're already at time. It feels like we just barely got Veronica on the panel and we got this great presentation. But I'd like to ask each of you just one thing that you think we need to do to build a bioeconomy more successfully. Beatrice, why don't we let you start, and you get the chance to make any other observation you want to make as well, because the microphone was headed to you.
I think since it's getting everyone around the clock on this, as we can see that it touches on multiple sectors, it's multidimensional in nature. So at the very beginning, to really support co-creation and co-designing of these solutions, and late the people-centered approach, looking at what would be the benefits and longevity around how to build really sustainability for the long haul. So it's both on it's sustainable production, but also on another hand, it's about sustainable consumption. So if we can address from that perspective, and looking at the current policies that we have in the different countries, for Malawi, for the other countries, and see then how do we then connect the dots and making sure that they are speaking to each other to advance both technological advancements, but also strengthening institutions that are going to deliver these particular industries. So I think it will take a multi-sector approach, all of us. It's a component on one side, but also putting in resources on research and development. So it will take public investments, but also private sector investments. So for private sector to come in, we are talking about industrialization. We must create conducive environment, look at our taxation schemes, looking at market development potential, but also we are in a global village and we are dealing with a global value chain. Let us really catalyze and leverage on the current existing both agriculture policies, trade policies, as well as industrial policies that should speak with one go. At the end of the day, it's about the people, profit as well as planet to build a sustainable bioeconomy within our countries. So yeah.
People, planet, profit. Gertrude.
Well, I guess Beatrice has said it all, but from my perspective as somebody that is working in government, I think we have an agenda in Malawi. We're calling it Malawi 2063, and we're looking at transforming our country into a middle-income country. And hemp, I think, fits in the picture because of its benefit that we've talked about here, because of the economic benefits. Actually, that's the drive on our part, but also for the environmental. So like I've already mentioned about how it can help us in sustainable land management. I believe that is the way that we're going to go forward. And yeah, we may decide on a model that will work for us. We've so many lessons, learned from the other crops, marketing issues and everything else. So we should be able to come up with a plan that will help us to advance towards what we have in our Agenda 2063, our own Malawi 2063, that is driving our ambitions and our economic goals and everything else. So that's what I can say. But we are ready. We are ready to go forward. We already have the policy and regulatory framework in place. We have an authority that is overseeing all this work. So in terms of the policies, who we work with, how we move forward, we are set. So I guess this is what I can say. Thank you.
Excellent. You're ready, and you're already wearing beautiful cotton African fabrics. John.
No, exactly. I'd just say someone from the private sector, but having worked in many countries in the global south looking to develop their agricultural sectors, we can have the best R&D and we can have the best market ideas and access, but without good governance, good regulations, stable laws, etc., it's very difficult to attract more people to come in. So I'm really happy to hear how successful it's going in Malawi. I think I was last in Malawi maybe 2 or 3 years ago, so it sounds like I need to get back sooner.
So because of the baggage that has traveled with industrial hemp, we've actually taken advantage of this new and growing goal of biodiversity, biomanufacturing. And we're working inside with our partners at USDA, Rural Development, who have the BioPreferred program, where they are actually working to help promote those products that are being manufactured in the United States that are using these best practices and alternatives. And I think that one of the other things that we're realizing is that there are many countries in the world who are advancing that same goals, and working together we can make it easier, and we can really accelerate the return to a more sustainable agricultural economy.
Fantastic. And Veronica, muchas gracias. What is the most important thing?
Coincido con lo que han dicho. Creo que la gobernanza es fundamental y la institucionalidad para poder, desde el sector público, que es desde donde yo hablo, justamente catalizar estos procesos para que lleguen al mercado en forma exitosa. Creo que además de la regulación, que es clave, y la gobernanza, la colaboración público-privada, y que el sector público ayude con inversión de riesgo, digamos, o sea, con la innovación, a lograr que se desarrollen productos industriales innovadores en los países del sur, porque si no, seguiremos siendo proveedores de una materia prima novedosa, pero me parece que lo que queremos es que los países del sur justamente podamos tener productos más diversificados y de mayor valor agregado, y creo que acá hay una gran oportunidad. Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you all so very much. Thank you to IECA for being extraordinary hosts. Thank you to all of you for attending, and thank you to our tremendous panel.